Hey, so I wanted to jump on the channel real fast to talk about something that I've talked about on my Discord channel, and I made a YouTube video about where I thought that I was going to make a video about the last 4-core Ryzen, and I thought that was going to be the Ryzen 3 2300X. And if you look at this Reddit post, I am O Sigma Chi, user O Sigma Chi. That's me. So you can, harass me on Reddit if you want to. Back 5 months ago, I asked r/AMD, Reddit AMD, why there isn't a 7 nanometer Ryzen 3. It really seemed to make sense to me as someone who is a builder. Like, I don't build systems for just myself. I build systems to sell daily, weekly. I try to sell as often as I can, right? And it made sense to me that the 4-core Ryzen chips from Ryzen Generation 1, Zen 1, namely the Ryzen 3 1200, the Ryzen 3 1300X, and the Ryzen 5 1400 and 1500X were bargain leaders. Especially after the second generation of Ryzen chips came out. The 2000 series of Ryzen chips came out. You could get those chips used extremely reasonable price, and repurpose them in newer builds with better video cards and a little bit more RAM, a little bit higher end RAM. A lot of those chips were used in pre-built machines, but they came in stripped down systems where they'd have a single stick of 8 GB RAM, that was 2400 megahertz max, maybe even 2133 DDR4, which is actually hard to find if you're not a system integrator. But as somebody who used those chips regularly and then put them on a better board, I would take a Ryzen 5 1500X or 1400X, for instance, and put it on an X370 board, give it 16 megabytes of DDR4 2866 or 3000 megahertz RAM, and pair it with an RX 580, and that would be typically a chip that would come paired with one single channel stick of DDR4 that was slow, and maybe like an RX 560, or even, I don't know, like a GT 710 or a GT 1030, in a really cheap pre-built. But those CPUs were actually a lot more usable than that, and they had a lot more headroom, and I feel like they were actually being bottlenecked by the constraints they were being put on. They were being put on AB 350 boards, and just really really hamstrung, being surrounded by really shoddy components and not being able to reach their full potential. As somebody who used those chips, those 4-core first generation Ryzen chips, it made sense to me that those should carry on. And also as somebody who uses and builds around Intel 4th generation Core i-series chips, namely the 4770K, on the 7 nanometer architecture, AMD could release a 4-core 8-thread CPU that would be just as usable today, maybe even more so, I think, maybe even better IPC, due to all the patches that have had to been used for Intel's security vulnerabilities, be more usable than a 4770K or a 3770K. I don't know about a 6700K, but but maybe close. In those upper echelon 4-core 8-threaded CPUs, why would AMD, upper echelon from yesteryear, I should say, why would AMD not want to offer a cheap entry level CPU into the AM4 socket that would eventually, if you bought a nice motherboard, even if you only bought an X470 or an X370 used, or a really nice B450, you could still take that, entry-level 4-core 8-threaded CPU like a Ryzen 5 1400 or 1500X, and eventually you could upgrade to all the way to a 3950X. It just really made sense to me, and I didn't understand why AMD wasn't doing that, right? Like, why AMD would not pursue 4-core 8-threaded chips. And, Reddit AMD had all kinds of, it doesn't make economic sense, and the die is not rendered that way, when they make the actual chiplets. Well, evidently all of that was baloney, because in the last 2 days, AMD's not only released a refresh of the Ryzen 3 1200, but they've released Ryzen Zen 2 3000 series 4-core 8-threaded chips. And I just wanted to get on here and toot my own horn and say, I thought of this and thought it was a good idea 5 months ago. And Reddit told me that I was wrong. And then I believed that I was wrong and believed what Reddit said. I thought, I bow to the powers that be. These guys, seem to know what they're talking about. They make plausible arguments. But in reality, as somebody who is not just a user, but a builder and builds systems around these chips regularly, I feel like I had a little bit more insight into the actual market of, what people need, what people like me need. I need economic chips to build systems around. Users need a toehold. They need an entryway to get into the AM4 platform. And right now, the Ryzen 5 3200 or the Ryzen 3 3200G and the Ryzen 5 3400G are not good toeholds. They're too expensive for one, and they have superfluous iGPUs. Nobody needs that. No gamer wants an iGPU, and I know Intel chips all have integrated graphics. I got it. I understand that. And that they have held the gaming crown for forever. But in reality, it's just dross, right? It's just extra crap on top of what you really want, which is a good, solid base foundation, entry-level gaming CPU, right? Or even just like productivity CPU. 4 cores, 8 threads gets you a lot of productivity. I mean, you don't necessarily need 6 cores and 12 threads to do productivity workloads. I know a lot of people who who thrive on 4-core, 8-threaded Intel iCore 7s, right? Older ones. 4770K and the 47 or the 4970K, whatever that thing is. There's a bunch of numbers and a K for 4th gen i7, right? And so I guess the moral of the story is I was right. Reddit told me I was wrong, and I should not ever have believed Reddit. And that is, that's a life lesson, but I hope, hopefully, on the tech stuff, I figured that there would be, since the plurality or the majority of answers were like, oh yeah, there's never going to be a 7 nanometer Ryzen 3. There's no need, blah, blah, blah. Here we are. 3000 series Ryzen 3 chips, no integrated graphics, no APUs, right? You have the refresh of the Ryzen 3 1200 and then 2 new Ryzen 3000 series 4-core chips. Kind of crazy that I didn't stick with my gut. I will remember this, and I will continue, and I will stick with my gut from here on out. I don't know if I can actually move this this website around and it will move on the thread. Let me see. Does that work? It does not. Okay, this is not like an actual screen capture. So this is just the website that I wanted you to see. This is the Reddit where I asked, why doesn't AMD have a 7 nanometer Ryzen 3? And, one person replied to me that, well, it's because the APUs fill that price segment. Because I posited, that a 4-core, 8-threaded, in my mind, a Ryzen 3 3300X, would, crush the i3 9350K, which is an exorbitantly priced CPU for what it is. It's 4 cores. There's no multi-threading. It's 4 cores, 4 threads. It is unlocked, but that thing's like almost $200 if you can find it. It's stupid. It's stupid how much that Intel CPU costs. And I just figured that a 7 nanometer AMD chip, with 4 cores and 4 threads, unlocked multiplier like AMD always does, would just crush the lights out of anybody. The only people who would buy an i3 9350 at that point would just be fanboys who just can't help themselves. That's basically, that would be your only audience at that point. And then, somebody told me the APUs fill that price point, but again, I just talked about, like, I don't feel the APUs may fill that price segment, but they don't fill that market segment, right? Nobody wants an APU. If you're a gamer, you don't care about integrated graphics. It might be nice to have if you're having, issues and you need a diagnostic fallback so that you have that integrated graphics for, trying to boot into safe mode or whatever. But by and large, nobody wants integrated graphics. Nobody cares. Everybody wants a discrete graphics card that will crush the daylights out of Red Dead Redemption 2, right? Or Grand Theft Auto 5, or whatever it is that you're playing. And then, they also said that the 2600 is still in production. But this 2600 still being in production did not stop AMD from releasing the Ryzen 5 1600 AF for approximately $40 cheaper than a brand new Ryzen 5 2600. And it is Zen Plus. And the 2600 is Zen Plus. Right? And then somebody said it's because, well, they can sell every single 7 nanometer chiplet for much more, right? Saying that the 7 nanometer yields are in 6 cores. Why would you sell a 6-core chiplet with 2 cores disabled or lopped off, lasered off, or whatever, when you can just sell the 6 cores for more money? And that made a little bit of sense to me. More money is more money, but there's no such thing as a perfect yield process. And as time went on, I figured that eventually AMD and TSMC, who's their foundry, that's who makes the actual chiplets for their for the dies, right? TSMC would eventually come upon a substantial amount of what should have been 6-core process, 7 nanometer process nodes, or 7 nanometer node process chips that couldn't maintain the clocks or what have you on all 6 cores, but 4 of those cores were still good, right? There's no such thing as a perfect yield. Even if yields are great, which one other Redditor says to me, 7 nanometer yields are awesome, there's never going to be a market for these, or they're never going to have a supply, basically. Oh, they said that it's only because they produce an 8-core die, which that makes even less sense to me. Why do they only produce 8-core dies, but then they produce 6-core, 12-threaded chips? Maybe, I don't know. Answer me that in the comments. And he says selling 4 locked cores for lower price doesn't make sense. They only sell 2 locked 6-core units due to the damage on the die. But what you could do is you could, and I believe TSMC possesses the technology to do this, is you can take an 8-core die and split it. You'd have to marry it up to the I/O controller correctly. I don't know if that's possible. Those fellows out in Taiwan, they're pretty smart about this kind of thing. I think they could figure it out, and evidently it looks like they have. Again, there's another Redditor telling me, this is the APUs, the APU, the 3200G and the 3400G have got this covered. But the 3200G is 4 cores, 4 threads. It's not what I talked about in my initial post, which was a 4-core, 8-threaded CPU with no integrated graphics, right? And the Ryzen 5 3400G is mediocre performer, honestly, when it's coupled with a discrete graphics card compared to a 3600G. I would never choose a 3400G over a 3600G ever. And no, I don't think any gamer should. The only time you should have to make that choice is if you just absolutely want a game today, and it's okay if you game at 720p, and you're going to have to save up money for later to buy a designated graphics card. I guess that's the only point where an APU makes sense. It makes a ton of sense for the enterprise market, right? For where you want large scale deployments. You don't need designated graphics because it's thin client deployments or whatever, and you just need basic 2 or 3 panel output at 60 frames a second, or 30 frames a second, 1080p or whatever your business class monitor is, and you're not worried about input latency and frames per second and refresh rate or any of that kind of stuff, right? You just need pixels on the screen for office work. APUs make a ton of sense for that. Home computers, what I colloquially call an email box, yeah, absolutely. That's what APU's for. APUs aren't for gamers. I don't know why these people think that's going to satisfy our segment, right? People who are hardware enthusiasts who want good hardware to play demanding games, right? Yeah, another person talking about yields, and then Matisse. It's even more difficult with Matisse, which is this is the code name for the 7-nanometer process, because a quad chiplet would still need the I/O die, which has significant cost from the 12-nanometer silicon and added packaging costs, so it's even more impractical. Evidently, AMD found a way to make all of that be practical. Anyway, yeah, there's a whole bunch of people on Reddit who told me 5 months ago why my idea wouldn't work, and then AMD over the last 2 days has executed almost to a T my original idea from 5 months ago. I'm not saying they should hire me, but they should probably hire me. Yeah, probably not. I'm not an engineer. I just put parts together. Anyway, but I see the market. I sell to people who have budgets, real people who have real budgets all the time, and want to haggle with me, because I built this computer in my basement, and I built it for resale locally here on the Facebook markets and Craigslist or whatever. And I understand that they don't need 144 frames a second. They just want a game. They have a friend who plays PC games, and he plays that one game, and that's what I get told, right? That one game, and I'm just like, Fortnite? Yeah, it's Fortnite, actually, typically. They want to play Fortnite, or they want to play Apex Legends, and not get crushed, because their computer sucks, right? They can't play Fortnite and Apex Legends on the HP pre-built that their parents bought 6 years ago. So they need a slightly better computer. And that's where I come in. I fulfill that market because they don't know how to build a computer themselves. And maybe they could watch a YouTube video and figure it out, but a lot of people are just too scared or too worried about breaking expensive hardware to do such a thing. So I feel like AMD really does understand this level of the market. They've been down in the trenches with us budgeted gamers for a really long time. And Reddit AMD doesn't understand. That's funny. That the Redditors who are all about this subreddit don't understand what the company understands, and that's where budget gamers live, right? Anyway, this has just been a rant. Good Lord, YouTube. I've been ranting for quite a while. I guess I better hang it up. But I was just caught off guard, honestly, by the launch of all these new AMD 4-core processors, especially after I made a video where I posited that the Ryzen 3 2300X would be the last quad-core AMD processor because of the response to me and my post on this Reddit. I won't be doing that again. All right, I'm out.